Looking for healthier, fuller hair? Do you want extra money for bills, trips, extracurricular activities for your kids, or do you want to replace your entire income? Monat is the answer. Our products are Leaping Bunny certified, vegan, and Monat can be used by anyone, including your kids and pets. Message me on my Instagram to partner with me. Founder shares are available, and as a market partner, you have access to uncapped bonuses, 45% commission, 35 to 55% off discounts, on top of all-inclusive paid trips. Right now, I also have a free gift for anyone that partners with me, so don't miss out. You can message me on my Instagram at Liz Chilvers.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good evening, welcome along to NUFC Matters. It is a pre-recorded show with these two legends, Supermac and Gibbo. Good evening, lads.
Hi, Steve. Hello, John.
Good to see you. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of Newcastle United over the last 7 days, John, you were set a task last week by one of our viewers to do with the Fairs Cup final. So over to you, John.
Yeah, and I found it intriguing myself because it was something I took part in but couldn't answer it off the top of my head. And the guy's question, which you might remember, he said he was quite amazed when he watched the final against Doza at home to see 4 subs on the bench, and he couldn't remember who they were at all, and he was fascinated who they were. And I drew an absolute blank, apart from saying that one of them was definitely Alan Foggin because he got on, and therefore I knew, and it was recorded in my mind, it was Foggin. So I then looked it up in my book after I went off air, and sure enough, the guy was absolutely right. There was 4 subs on the bench that night when we beat Doza at home 3-0. Foggin was the one that got on. The other 3 subs were John Craggs, John McNamee, and 3 Johns, and John Hope. Hope was the goalkeeper. And McNamee, we all know, of course, and Craggsy, who made his name.
If it moved, he kicked it.
Aye, yeah. And funny enough, in the away leg, Malcolm, when we played Uzpest away, in the second leg, when we won it, we only had 3 subs. We sometimes had 3, we sometimes had 4. Craggsy wasn't on the bench in the away leg. We had Foggin, McNamee, and Hope again, and Foggin got on and scored.
So you had 4 subs on the bench. You could go up to what, a maximum of 4, or was it 5?
Yeah, I think it was a maximum of 4, of which one got on, and then both times it was Alan Foggin.
Okay, but how many could go on?
Only one, I think.
Just the one of the 4?
Certainly Newcastle United, in the whole run, Malcolm, Newcastle never put on more than, Joe Harvey never put on more than 1 sub.
Okay, so that was really covering goalkeeper, defence, midfield, and attack.
Yes.
So somebody for each slot.
Yeah, and both times it was McNamee and Hope. And early in the rounds, before Hope joined us, Dave Clark, the goalkeeper at Blythe, remember, who never
Yes.
who never played first team for us, didn't have a first team game, but he was on the bench as the cover goalkeeper. In the early rounds of the First Cup, then John Hope signed for us, and Hope he was the goalkeeper. Bless him, he's passed away now, as you probably know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Sadly.
aye, he was the
He's a
cover
lovely
goalkeeper,
lad, wasn't he?
and in
Lovely
the
lad.
aye, he was in the final. John McNamee, who was sub, it was his birthday. He didn't get on, but it was his birthday on the finals day, and it was Joe's birthday as well on the finals day. So they had quite a party afterwards, as you can imagine. But the one, and of course, Foggin was the super sub in the away leg of the final. Malcolm,
Yes.
and you'll remember because you see him often enough at
Mm.
St James's
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he scored the goal and the winning goal. We were 2-0 down. We got the winning goal on the night. We got the 2-2, and then he went down one half length of field, chucked it in 3-2 on the night, 6-2 on aggregate. But in both the finals, Foggin got on. But what obviously interested the man asking the question, the fan, was he realised Foggin got on, but who the earth was the other three? And I couldn't remember. And it was Craggs, McNamee, and Hope.
Right.
That little black book, or those little black
Oh,
books, John.
It's all in there, mate.
Oh,
What's
it's
not in there is in the
historical gold.
They'll end up in Beamish, them books, John, one day. But great stuff. Fantastic. Thank you for doing your research, and thank you for the question to whoever it was who asked that last week. But great stuff. Okay, since we last did the podcast, there's been interviews. We were talking about Amanda and Maydad leaving last week, but we'd already heard from Darren Eales. I think on Thursday when we did the show last week, it was Paul Mitchell's turn to come out and have his say. And then, of course, as we were predicting, Eddie Howe was going to have his say on the Friday. So, John, I'll come to you as the journalist first, I guess, and get your views on what Eddie Howe said. And we obviously did that night at the Irish Centre on the weekend. Yeah. And thanks to everyone who came. We did raise over, as you will have heard earlier in the week, over £1,000 for the dementia charity. And big shout out to Melly Bonds, the Man U fan from Melly's Carpets, who is a good friend of mine who agreed to go up and do the carpets for the dementia centre. So that money now can be spent on other things, which is fantastic. So well done to them. But yeah, I got the impression, as a lot of fans did, that Eddie was keeping his options open, showing that he didn't want to be bossed around by what he said, but also positively wanting to stay at Newcastle and wanting to win something, which is great. So I got a few mixed messages in the stuff that I saw. The journalists who I watch on here on YouTube, the likes of Keith Downey, for example. I watched the Geordie journals give their impressions. They were in Germany. They had the privilege of sitting down and talking and listening to Eddie Howe. They all said one thing in their reports, but in their own personal YouTubes, they gave an indication that maybe this was an anxious Eddie Howe. This wasn't the usual confident Eddie Howe that they see in front of them. This was somebody who was a little bit, there's something rattled him. So, John, you didn't have the pleasure of being out there, but from your contacts and from what you saw and what you've read and what you've listened to, what was your impression?
Really, particularly that he shocked everybody that was there, because the word round all the hacks before the press conference was, we know what Eddie'll do. He'll come out, he'll pledge himself to Newcastle because no job's been offered. And as I was saying to Malcolm, it's easy to turn down a job that hasn't been offered. It's a bit more difficult when it's actually been offered. So the feeling was that Eddie would come out, he would say, look, England's another day. I haven't been offered it. I'm not going to be diverted from giving up my everything to Newcastle. I'm out here to concentrate on the new season, blah, blah, blah. He didn't do that. And it shocked everybody rigid because they weren't expecting it. And by the way, with hindsight, the feedback we've had since, it absolutely shocked Newcastle United, who had no prior warning that he was going to do anything like this. And it was very calculated, and it wasn't heated. Eddie doesn't get heated. He doesn't do heat. he does straight bat and pad and say it how it is. And it was, and Malcolm and I talked about it. We talked about it, Steve, on the show on Saturday night. He'd thought it out. It was quite a deliberate attempt. When you can speak from strength, that is the moment to speak. And he could speak from strength because England were interested in him. He was asked questions about England. He wasn't speaking from a manager hanging on to a job. He was speaking as a manager wanted very much by Newcastle and equally probably wanted by the FA. So he was in a position of strength. But he reiterated it on individual interviews he did on camera with various people from Sky to the NUFC, etc., etc. He reiterated each time that my choice is to stay at Newcastle. And I don't doubt that, by the way, for 1 second. He wants to stay at Newcastle, but he wants to stay at Newcastle on his own terms. And his own terms are not that he wants anything that he didn't already have. He wants to keep what he had. He doesn't want anything more. But having lost Amanda Staveley and her husband, who were very big supporters of his, and having had a change in sporting director, who was going to be much more hands-on and going to have a different slant from what was there before, he was anxious on two accounts. One is that he has the final say on transfers, not the only say. Paul Mitchell will have a big input too, but the final say must be his. I.e., if he doesn't want him, please don't buy him, because then he won't pick him and you've wasted your money. So he wants the final say on transfers. He also wants to feel that what he does day to day on the training ground won't be impacted by other people, because we've had Paul Mitchell and Bunce, the fitness guy, standing pitch side during the games. That can make you feel uneasy. Am I going to be diluted? What I can do, and if I'm diluted enough, am I just going to become first team coach, not first team manager? And Malcolm, you know the huge difference between those two positions, and that was what he was looking at, and that is not a criticism of Paul Mitchell, because we've got nothing to criticise him for yet, because we haven't seen him in operation. We might be doing him a disservice. Eddie might be doing him a disservice, but it wasn't intended. It was what I've got, I want to keep. This is the way I work. And I'm a workaholic. And if Newcastle are going to be successful, and we have since the takeover, then I've got to operate under those situations. And it shocked everybody. I can tell you, knocking it on from what happened in Germany, that it absolutely shocked Newcastle United rigid. They didn't have any forewarning that he was going to come out with anything bar niceties. But I've got to hasten to add that instead of feeling outraged or feeling their authorities being challenged or anything like that, they haven't reacted like that. They've reacted with, dear me, we don't want to create a problem. We haven't got a problem. So if we haven't got a problem, we don't want to create one. So I wrote an article after that all happened in Germany saying I was hoping Darren Eales would act as the go-between. I don't want to say peacemaker, because the two guys actually haven't fallen out. The possibility is they could, but they haven't fallen out. So peacemaker is too strong a word. But the man to smooth the path between Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe, I asked Eales to do that. He was the perfect man to do it, because we haven't gotten a man now. And Eales has known and worked with Eddie for a few months now, and he knows Mitchell, so he could. I said, please, will you smooth the path? And it's got nothing to do with me. I just got lucky. But that's what's happened. Eales has been used by the board to sit down with Eddie and say, look, Eddie, we're on the same page. We love you. We want you to stay. This is an effort to help you, not to hinder you, etc., etc. And they talked over having a short list of possible signings, and that maybe Paul Mitchell, with all his contacts on the continent, because he worked at Monaco, etc., can bring in new ideas and a fresh outlook on the transfer situation. But it was emphasized that we will not sign anybody that is not wanted by Eddie Howe. And these two guys will be able to work very well together. Now, we know the obvious answer, Malcolm, to all that is words are cheaper than actions. And while Eddie Howe has been pacified by the words, he'll want to see that transferred into action. Because it's easy to say, oh, let's all be friends. I mean, I presume when Gordon Lee come, you said, let's all be friends, but it didn't last for too long. And you don't want that to happen again. And so words action will be stronger than words. We will find out in the next month and a half whether they're on the same hymn sheet.
Sure, and I think as much as anything, one of the reasons that caused him to say this was that a year ago we signed the young lad from Chelsea, the left back, and
Lewis Hall.
It was on loan at that time with a view to signing him permanently this summer, and it was obvious that Eddie Howe didn't rate him. Not until the latter part of the season, when he put the lad into the side, and he started to do pretty well at left back. But it was obvious for me that Eddie Howe didn't fancy him to start with, and as much as anything, I think that this perhaps was a reason for prompting Eddie to say what he said, and to look to cement his position, strength, and power in the manager's seat.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Malcolm. It's got to be stressed, and I know you already know it, that the whole thing was nothing to do with Paul Mitchell. It was before Paul Mitchell came.
Yes, of course.
It wasn't Paul Mitchell bringing in somebody. And I think you're absolutely right. It was. I mean, I was flummoxed when we signed Lewis on loan, but with an agreement that we were committed to spending 28 million, providing certain conditions were met, and there were only Newcastle finishing at a certain position in the table, etc. It was obvious that somebody had seen the wonderful potential in him, but Eddie couldn't see the finished article when he saw him.
Yes,
and he wanted to bring him up to speed. He wanted to make him better defensively than he was when he arrived, and he proved that he was the boss. You can give me a player, but if I don't want to play him, I don't play him, man. And didn't play him, Malcolm, as you say, for ages, and it was an absolute head scratcher for people.
Yes, everybody was asking questions, weren't they?
Oh, I mean,
this guy's not injured, is he? You know, what's going on?
By the way, while we didn't have a right back, we were playing Burnett right back, who's a centre half, in preference to this kid. And even the funny thing is as well, Steve, that during this interview with Eddie Howe, which took place on Friday in Germany, one of the things that happened in that interview, and I mentioned it that it was all going to happen on last week's podcast before it did, was that before Eddie went up, they put up 3 players because they didn't know that this was going to be Eddie, sounding off on England, or England were going to be in. So we were going to be able to talk to 3 players, and the 3 players were the 3 players theoretically that were signed this summer. Lewis Hall, who would sign permanently, Kelly, who would come on a free transfer, and the Greek goalkeeper out of Nottingham Forest. They were the three players put up, and they were all put up first at the start of the conference so that you could talk to 3 players. But the minute Eddie come on last and then blew the ship out the water, of course, the interview with the 3 players just disappeared.
And it's not often, John, that a room full of press guys are absolutely stunned.
Oh, gobsmacked
by what they're hearing, and they were this time, weren't they?
Gobsmacked. everybody was staggered, really, because Eddie had kept it to himself. I was going, and Eddie's so diplomatic. Is we've laughed at many a time, Malcolm. He's a bloke that can say 50,000 words and he hasn't said bugger all. Because it's an art, and that's meant as a compliment.
Oh,
That
it
is
is.
an art.
Yeah.
He can talk for Christmas and not say a single thing. Every word he said here was explosive in its own little way. Although it was in a controlled voice, he didn't go wide-eyed or anything. It was very controlled, but it left nobody in any doubt, and it was repeated time and time again. But what I was about to say, Mal, just to finish, in those three player interviews, one of which was Lewis Hall, he referred to what happened to him last season and to the fact that he was sort of nowhere near the team at the early season and how difficult that was for him, but how he realised that you've got to be super fit to play in the Newcastle side as well, because if the demands on you for the high press and everything of that nature. He said he'd had a poor pre-season with Chelsea because Chelsea were indifferent to him. They were trying to unload him, so they didn't push him or give him minutes in games. And so he'd had a very poor pre-season, come to Newcastle with this high-octane approach and found it all too much. And he also admitted, Malcolm, that his defensive game had improved hugely in training during that long spell he wasn't in the side, because he had to be. So I think in hindsight, he realizes what was going on and is grateful for it. Although I think he was flummoxed a little bit at the time, but he thinks he's a better player for. But he admitted what you and I were thinking when we were looking at each other and saying, "Where's this guy? Where is this guy?" You know. So, but Eddie made a very good point with him. Nobody will play in my team, whether he's signed for Newcastle United or not, unless he's up to scratch. To a great extent, he did it with Gordon the previous end of that previous season, didn't he?
That's right. Yes, he did. Yes.
And that was the warning to Newcastle now. Please don't give me guys I don't want, because I won't play them.
Yes.
Mal, you've been in dressing rooms over the years as a manager and as a player. What is the kind of changes behind the scenes do for the dimensions in that dressing room? Because I've seen Joe Linton come out today as we pre-recorded this show, saying, I hope the gaffer doesn't leave. I will want him to stay. He's done so much great work here. I mean, it's clearly affecting Joe Linton. It's on his mind. So, the dimensions in the dressing room, Mal, what happens in a dressing room when things happen, like directors leaving, new people coming in, talk of new directions? What happens in the dressing room?
Yeah, well, footballers can talk far more than two ladies over a fence, but what they do is they completely separate the conversation that they're having and what they need to do and where they're going. So it just for example, let's say that there's been a few headlines that the manager's going to get sacked. That doesn't affect the players. They know that they have to keep going. They'll talk about it a huge amount. They'll give an opinion. Oh, I don't want to see him go. Well, he's done me no favours, says another, and so on and so forth. So, but it's having that ability to be able to separate. You have your opinion, but you then you leave the dressing room and you go out and do your professional business and not be affected by anything that's going on. And of course, that all players experience managers being changed. Managers go, they come, they go, they come. But you just have to get on. And basically what you have to do is look to the inside of yourself and find the very, very best and bring it out.
You're right, Malcolm. I mean, what's interesting as well, Mal, I think what's slightly different here is that since the takeover, and Eddie Howe come in very, very quickly after the takeover, Steve Bruce lasted just a few weeks, and then Eddie Howe's here. Eddie Howe has deliberately built Newcastle, and by Jove, it's off work, on the all for one and one for all business. We're all in
Yes.
this together. We're all comrades. We're all going to stick together. It's going to happen. Let's have these huge team photographs after we win. Let's go around the ground after we've won on the pitch, clapping the fans. We're all in this together. Now, all of a sudden, in that, very quickly got rid of the worry about relegation, very quickly got us into
Yes.
the top four, very quickly got us Champions League football, very quickly got us a Wembley Cup final. And all of a sudden now, the great component, the biggest brick in the wall, i.e. Eddie Howe himself, the manager that set all this up, might theoretically leave. I don't think he's going to leave whatsoever.
No,
he
I
might
don't.
theoretically leave, Malcolm, and therefore players are. I mean, if managers are going to get sacked, that is because results are going poorly, and a lot of players are saying, "Good riddance, really. We don't care if he goes. We'll look after ourselves." But if you're being successful, if a manager's made players twice the player they were, whether that was Almiron originally, or whether it was Byrne, or whether it was some of the fringe players, whether it was Longstaff, you don't want that guy to leave because he's had such a good effect on you. He rates you. I mean, if you're regularly in the Newcastle side, and some of these players are, he's very loyal to you. You stay in the side. If he's the one that's suddenly going to go, you think, oh, and they realise in their eyes, he would be driven out. If he was going to desert them, they would say, wait a minute, you've told me to stay at Newcastle and everything because Newcastle are going places, then you bail out for a better job. But I don't think they look at it that he's threatening to bail out for a better job with England. They're looking at it that if you're going to rock the boat, that we're talking about the directors here, nobody else, the directors, if you're going to rock the boat and this guy's got to leave, we're going to be decimated. But I think all this, guys, and it's only my opinion, and it doesn't obviously mean it's right, but I honestly believe all this will settle down. And
Yes, I agree with John on that. But one thing I would say is, though, that Eddie Howe, he was very fortunate to come into the situation that existed because if you remember rightly, prior to him coming, that players were pleading with Steve Bruce to do more training. They were losing their fitness. Steve Bruce had actually turned the club pretty much into a part-time club, and that I think players were down to 3 days a week training. And Eddie Howe has come in quite the reverse, the total opposite. And he must have been like manna from heaven for the players. And so that fantastic relationship between players and manager was suddenly absolutely bonded, and everybody, they could see that the future was bright, whereas there was just nothing with Steve Bruce and the owner, of course, at the time, that and so the spirit that must exist within Newcastle United, and it's felt by everybody. And I think even the supporters realise that the spirit's great within the club, and they just add hugely to it.
Can I give you a couple of examples, Malcolm, so that I feel which supports exactly what you're saying? Let's just take two players who were already at Newcastle. They play under Steve Bruce. Suddenly Eddie Howe comes in and their lives transformed.
Yes.
Fabian Shaw was a walking mistake. He is now looking Cary Grant to football. He's now looking Mr. Smooth, Mr. Wonderful, on the ball, terrific. He was
magnificent in the recent championships.
And he's transformed, Malcolm. So he's not going to want the guy that transformed him to go. And now a second example, if I may give it, and I know you agree with it, Malcolm, is Joe Linton, a centre forward who was on the verge of being ridiculed, but who Eddie Howe changes to a midfielder and he ends up in the Brazilian national side.
Yes.
So, do you think that Joe Linton, who's been transformed from almost a joke centre forward with the crowd into a beast of a midfield player who's got everything and makes a Brazilian side, and you get Shaw, who Steve Bruce wouldn't even play. He didn't want Shaw on his side, who then becomes the coolest guy in the building. He's the Fonz. I mean,
absolutely. And look at the way he was getting forward, and he's been scoring goals.
So
I never believed that was possible under Steve Bruce.
Can you imagine those two guys thinking this guy might leave? I mean, they're going to be thinking it doesn't matter what manager we get, he's not going to be better for us than Eddie Howe is. So of course the players, because there's that togetherness and all for one and one for all, they're going to want them to stay. But I honestly think, and I hope I'm not proved wrong, by Jove I do, but I honestly think by the time we kick off against Southampton, all our blue chip players have stayed, and hopefully we've got an outside right and a centre half minimum, and Eddie Howe's still very much in charge. We can say, wasn't that a worry, but didn't it prove to be far too blown out of proportion? Everything's okay now, let's go. Because anything else for us as Geordies would, having gone through all the Ashley years, anything and haven't gotten to calm waters, to suddenly find a choppy sea would be horrendous.
All good stuff, lads. Halfway through the show, and as always, it's time for the ads.
A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins. You can find their website at skipsandbins.com. Contact us, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. They are the Travel and Tourism Award winners in 2024. Their website, www.unitedgrouptravel.com. Email beverly.ugtl@gmail.com or telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Just £30 per person deposit. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. A big thanks to Media Arts. You can find them at www.media-arts.co.uk. And don't forget, we are a podcast. You can find us on iTunes or Spotify or other podcast providers. If you want to help the channel grow, then hit the like button, the little thumb underneath the video, click share and share to your social media, or join the channel for as little as $1.99 a month. If you want to take out a one-off payment membership, go to nufcmatters.com and hit membership. And for a £25 fee, you get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card. You can also put a smartphone over the top of this QR code. It'll take you straight there. And don't forget, we also help the food bank on this channel. NUFCfansfoodbank.co.uk is a website where you can make a virtual donation today.
And it's your last chance to get tickets to see Gibbo with Rob Lee at the Gateshead Leisure Centre. Tickets available from gatesheadleisurecentre.co.uk and they are £30. Okay, Callum Wilson, Malcolm, the current incumbent of the number 9 shirt. We got the news again back end of last week that he's had minor surgery on his back, which is potentially going to rule him out at the start of the season. Another injury, Malcolm, with a year left on his contract. Some thinking that the exit was potentially looking likely for him. Where does it put Callum Wilson, and where does it put Newcastle United?
Well, age is is going to be getting the better of him now, isn't it? Sadly, and with age comes more injuries. That all the defects for over a career, they sort of mount up at the end of it, and really give the player problems, and that's what's happening. I think with Callum, his finishing is quite superb, but he needs to be fit to be out on the pitch to be able to score. And there is your big question mark. How long will he be fit for through the season? And I know that Eddie Howe, he's been quite adamant in wanting to keep Callum Wilson as a member of the squad. And obviously it's for goals. He offers nothing but goals, and well, you can't complain about that. The only thing is that does concern me is what else is there? You know, when you think that there's Isaac, who he got injuries himself last season as well. So if neither of those are available, I just feel that we're a bit lightweight then up front, you know, and I hate it. I hate it when I see them dragging Gordon and playing him as a what do they call it? A false number 9.
A false 9, yes.
I absolutely hate it, because what you're doing is you're losing an outstanding left winger to have a false 9, which
he's only half as good as a false 9, isn't he, than he is as an outside left.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I really do feel that, and I've felt for a long while that we need to strengthen in that department. And I'm not sure what youngsters are coming through, because you only, you know, in that position, you only find out when they're actually put in the side, see what they can do.
I mean, from me, Mal, I mean, I look at the situation and I can't believe it. I mean, this guy, honestly, he's pulling out. He may be not ready for the start of the season. I mean, he pulls out late more than Joe Biden. I mean, he just days before the election, and he goes missing. Right? I mean, oh dear, I can't. We didn't.
I've heard, John. I've heard that Joe Biden's very upset.
Well, he is
about you pairing him with.
Joe Biden, Wilson. If he'd stayed on, he would have had He would have had Callum Wilson as his running mate. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It goes over to Germany. We're playing a friendly at the end of the week in Germany, and Callum, bless him, doesn't even make the friendly. He doesn't get injured in the friendly. He gets sent home before the friendly. We haven't kicked the ball in anger yet, and he's back home. Now, honestly, and I've been a huge fan of Callum Wilson, as Malcolm. I've said on this program time and time again, and I've said it in the Chronicle, this guy, as a finisher, etc., has all the attributes to be one of the number 9 legends at Newcastle. Had he been fully fit, he scored 48 goals for Newcastle, and he's hardly played. He's only played 108 games. In
10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and he scores goals.
It's incredible. But for me, if ever there's a warning that Newcastle are flying by the seat of their pants, it's that Callum Wilson had to come home before ball was kicked in Germany and is in doubt for the season. Can we risk him being the only centre forward cover if we are going for the top 4 in the Champions League? Because that is what we now face. That is the situation we face. Now, we're almost made it too late to do something about it. There's only a month and a half if the transfer window open. Can we sell Callum Wilson in that time? Who's going to want him with this record? Possibly only the Saudis, with his record not of goals but of injuries. Possibly only the Saudis, and might then only get, say, 12 million. But if we've got to not only sell him, but we've then got to buy a replacement, because we can't sell him and not have a replacement. We're in huge trouble. Now, I don't know that there's enough weeks left for us to do those two major things. And you know what? I honestly think, Malcolm, without being too critical, but facing facts, we have fudged the Callum Wilson situation for far too long. We should have addressed this ages ago. It was a problem last season. It contributed hugely to us finishing only 7th and not being in Europe. Us not having a centre forward to back up Isaac, who we could rely on fitness-wise, come home to bite us. And we are in a situation where we will probably be going into the new season in exactly the same situation if we can't sell them and get a replacement quick. And we haven't done it so far in the transfer window, so have we got time left to do it? Now, if we do, and you know what? If we don't sell him now, we don't make a penny on him, because at the end of next season, he's a free transfer.
So
we don't make a penny from him. But even if we have to stick with him this coming season, because time's going to run out, and that will be a little bit short of a disgrace, but it'll not be good. It really will not be good. If we have to do that on September the 1st and the transfer window's closed, we have got to continue looking for a centre forward.
Yes.
We've got to try all during the closed window that we can sign a one in January. Or if we don't sign a one in January, we can sign a one the minute the window opens next summer, because we're going to have to. And you know what? If we keep all our 4 blue chip players, which is Gordon, Bruno, Isaac, and Joe Linton. If we keep all those 4 and we sign an outside right to go straight in the team, and we sign a centre half to still compete with Shaw for that position, we still have an Achilles heel to get in the top 4 and make Europe. And the Achilles heel is the cover for Isaac. If we do all that, we've got Wilson. Malcolm, would you agree we've still got an Achilles heel, which is the cover guaranteed for Isaac?
Sure, absolutely, John. I think it was just before the Euros that there was a quite a big story about Arsenal showing great interest in Isaac, and I just thought that would be complete and utter disaster.
Can't even think about it, Malcolm. Can't even think about it.
No, and so it just that story in itself was enough to really put the collywobbles in me with regards to, well, who the hell have we got? What are we going to do? Play kids? Play Gordon out of position again?
One fan said to me, Malcolm, and it was good intentions, and I know where he was coming from, but he said to me, look, let's keep Wilson. He'll only be fit for half a season, but in that half a season he scores goals, and therefore when he comes in for Isaac, he'll score goals. But the half a season that he's going to be fit, will it coincide with the half a season when Isaac's injured? I mean, Isaac could be injured, and this fella's injured as well. I mean, it doesn't. If we get half the season out of Wilson, we're not guaranteed it'll be the right half of the season when he's needed. I mean, it might.
That's right.
Be. And by the way, if we are playing your favourite expression that makes you smile, Malcolm, if we are playing false number 9s, I'll tell you one thing: we don't make the Champions League. We don't make the Champions League with a false 9 because. That's right. We haven't got a out-and-out goal scorer. Yeah. We haven't got an outside left because
you lose Gordon on the left. All that he offers then.
I come back to it. everything can fall in place like a jigsaw. We keep our 4 blue chip players, we're buying outside right, and we'll buy a centre half, and we say we're cooking. We're going into the Champions League. No, not if our only cover for a centre forward is Callum, who I adore as a player but isn't fit, because that will sell us short. At some time in the season, Isaac won't be available or hit a poor piece of form. Difficult to see that because he's such a player, but it happens. He hits poor form, and you haven't got to bring a sub on to replace him at any stage. If we haven't got great cover for Isaac, that can be the difference between finishing 4 and finishing 6 or 7.
Yes. Now, and I just want to throw a little something in here because, and this, I just found it quite extraordinary that the club could get into this kind of situation by signing 2 players at the same time, almost for the same position.
I know what you're saying.
Gordon and Barnes.
I mean, I rate Barnes. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong and think I'm saying Barnes isn't good enough. But when you've signed Gordon, why are you signing another outside left for big money?
Precisely.
If you haven't got an outside right and you haven't got a centre forward. Difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad he's here. Don't get me wrong, because I think he's good. And I want, as you said, Malcolm, like Manchester City's got, I want 2 good players for every position.
Absolutely.
But having said that, we could have done with an outside right instead of an outside left, and we could do with a centre forward.
What's your thoughts on Bunce, lads? Bunce has come in. An interesting Paul Mitchell talking about him. It was his appointment. He's come in, James Bunce, as a injury specialist. How does that change things behind the scenes, Malcolm, again? Because we can point to Eddie Howe's time at Bournemouth, where a lot of journalists have pointed to the fact that there was a lot of bad injuries down there, and it was because of the high-intensity training that he does. I mean, I guess there's a possibility Bunce could come in and say, well, hold on, we can't be doing that. And again, that's going to cause issues, isn't it?
Well, cause issues, or it could be an answer to a major question that the club have at the moment. Because when you think that through last season there were more long-term injuries than short-term, well, that just doesn't happen in a football club, but it did to Newcastle last season, and so I would imagine that it was because of that situation that they've got this injury specialist in, and great, because he's not just there to cure injury, but he's there to prevent it in the first place.
Correct.
Yeah, and so he will be working hard with players, and I think it was when I was at Arsenal that I think they were the first to ever do this. And for the warm up in training, the physio used to take it, and I'd never come across that before, and it was almost like a quite different experience, very much on completely stretching the body out, so that it limited injuries, limited the risk of injury, and it was marvellous. That was Fred Street, of course, who was the physio with England for a long, long time, whilst he was at Arsenal, and he was a great fella as well. But I have a feeling that this guy who has come in, that he is there, to keep players fit in terms of physiotherapy, if you like, that they stay clear of injury as much as possible, and if he does that, he'll be doing a great job, an absolute great job.
I think you're right, Malcolm. I agree with both your points of view. I know what Steve says. You take the theory, and if you're worried about Paul coming in as a sporting director, his appointment was bunched. So, is this going to cause more aggravation? I think it's going to work exactly the opposite way. The first reaction of Eddie on Friday when he was talking about the new setup, he was obviously talking. It's early days for me and Paul. We've got to see if we can work together. Hopefully, we can work together. If we do, we'll be fine. Asked about Bunce, he then said, "Well, my first impressions with Bunce, with James, is terrific. It's gone well, and he's desperate for Eddie's desperate for an answer to his problem, and Bunce isn't going to tread on Eddie's feet." Because the guy that can solve an injury problem is totally separate from Eddie, because Eddie Eddie can't solve the injury problem. So this is only going to help.
And the guy, he could maybe, he might just be giving a good little bit of advice to Eddie in terms of what to do in training.
Of course. I think Eddie doesn't see Bunce as a possible problem. It could be elsewhere. Bunce can be a huge help to him, and Bunce has got a record at previous clubs, and I forget where it was, but it might well be Monaco. I think it was Monaco, where he went. And they had the sort of injury problem Newcastle had, and he cleared it up. Now, this fella can be manna for heaven for Eddie Howe, as well as for Newcastle United, and as well as for individual players. And as Malcolm correctly said, it is not a matter of Bunce clearing up a guy who's had an injury. It's prevention. It's prevention. It's the answer to this problem. It's not that he's got a magic wand. When you're injured, come and see me. I'll sprinkle you with stardust and you'll be fine in the morning. It's prevention. It's what to do not to get into this situation. It's important. I think he is seen by Eddie at this early stages as somebody that might well be a godsend, and is certainly going to be a help. But I want to emphasize, as far as Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe's concerned, I don't, it's easy for Newcastle fans, it's easy for me, and it's easy for other people to get on Paul Mitchell's case, because Eddie's the man we love. Eddie's the man that's come in. Eddie's the man that's transformed the club. Eddie's the man that's got us in the Champions League in a Wembley Cup final. So we're on Eddie's side, and we are on Eddie's side. But let's not hammer Mitchell. He hasn't proved to be a disadvantage yet. He may prove to be a terrific advantage. It may prove to be the best partner. Certainly the partnership he had with Pochettino at both Southampton and Spurs was very close and very good. And so maybe that will happen exactly the same again with this guy. Let's give it a chance. Let's give it a chance to breathe.
Absolutely. Yes.
And work.
Yeah. Big question for you, John. I guess everybody watching will want to know, is anything looking, close to happening in the transfer window? Because, all of this period of, disruption behind the scenes is taking the front pages and taking the back pages as well. So now, we've still got till the 1st of September, so there's plenty of time. But Eddie did ask for 2 players in before the trip to Japan. We've got Hull City this weekend, and we're very competitive, and then we're away. So anything looking likely, John?
I was going to say, it's very difficult to get somebody now through the front door before Japan. I'm very anxious to get them through, as Eddie is, as quickly as possible, to give them time to bed in and get to know each other, not just tactically, but the way we play fitness-wise. I mean, Bruno was kept out the game kept out of our first team for 6 weeks when he first came, and was very, very chuffed about that. But they will bring them up to speed. You look at people like what happened to Lewis Hall last season. You look at what happened to Gordon when he first come. They don't go, and Lewis Hall and Gordon were 2 people that come from England, so they knew the game over here. Bruno was a foreign player, but so you need time to integrate them. So we need it to be quick. The sooner, the better. Outside right for me is the blue chip signing. We're going to, if we sign a centre forward, it'll be cover for Isaac. If we sign a centre half, it won't be cover for Shaw, but he'll have to fight Shaw for the position. And Shaw's got a right to expect to start against Southampton because of his last season in his form in the Euros. If we sign an outside right, he goes straight in the team. Because Miggy, they will attempt to sell. Murphy will be the guy on the bench that comes into the team and does well like he's done in the past. The outside right we sign will be for the first team. And just a shot in the dark, we've had Elanga mentioned, we've had the Brentford guy Maburmo mentioned, but a shot in the dark, somebody I know Newcastle have shown an interest in is Nico Gonzalez of Fiorentina, who is a quality player. He's a left-footed outside right, which sounds a contradiction. But
Gordon's a right-footed left winger.
Eddie likes playing that way, where it's the same on the other side with Gordon.
It's that ability, John, to you can either go down the line or you can come inside and get your shot in. And that's what Gordon's been doing all of last season.
Yeah, and he likes that.
He can go two ways.
That. And Don Hutchinson, who you might know, he made his name at Liverpool, etc. He was born and bred in Gateshead. He's a Geordie lad. He played for Scotland, but that's because his dad was from Scotland and he got the chance to play for Scotland. But he's now Geordie. I got to know Don in the old days, and I've got a lot of time for Don. He was a good footballer and he knows footballers, and he is very much a Nico Gonzalez fan. He has called him a replica of Bernardo Silva, and if he's as good as that, he's tasty. If he's as good as that, he's tasty. And he is a great believer that he would be a great signing for anybody. Newcastle have got him on the radar. They have asked about him. So shot in the dark, don't lose the name Nico Gonzalez at Fiorentina.
Okay, interesting. Great to hear your opinions on that, John. And from my perspective, I just hope, as you say, we'll get somebody through the door. That is the hour, lads. Great show, as always. We'll have some football to talk about next week. We'll see what Newcastle do against Hull City. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction, but we look forward to chatting again next week. Thanks for coming on early this week, lads. Take care.
God bless.
Right. Take care, everybody.